Still the problem?
I don't see you yet.
Okay.
Welcome. Okay.
I guess I'm a better furniture maker and commodity trader than I'm on Zoom.
Yeah, all of us are. We all are.
No?
We're all not very good about the Zoom, I think.
All right. Anyway, it was really a pleasure to meet you. You bring a smile to my face when I watch your videos on YouTube.
Oh, really? I love trying to put together the story of the neighborhood of Williamsburg. It is such a fascinating story of Jewish immigration, and it is tied to so many amazing stories. So I enjoyed studying it.
But it's amazing that the knowledge that you have and how you put the Hasidic community in perspective, and I commend you for that. The kol hakavod, as they say in Hebrew. Okay.
I appreciate that.
I can start my earliest recollection in Williamsburg, believe it or not. I was born in 49. I'm at 1952, and my youngest brother, who lives in London, Manny, 52, 53, I started getting recollections of, and as I got older, I have more and more recollections of Williamsburg. When I live in Staten Island, New York, my wife and I, we have an apartment in Israel. We spend a lot of time there. And because I had an illness, I haven't been traveling. But once every 2 weeks, we travel to Williamsburg to go shopping. And they all know me, Chaim Weiss from Staten Island, and the heimische Yid. And nicht kan chusset, but wie unsere.
It translate that.
So basically, he's not a Hasidic Jew, but he's one of ours. So they can't understand how is it that a modern-looking man, and now I have, of course, I had longer hair. My wife made me cut off my hair before I went for surgery a month ago, and I wear these fancy hats and sunglasses. When I go to Williamsburg, they can't connect. They don't understand. They don't understand that a man of 72 years old is in Williamsburg, and he goes to Tauber's Fish Store, who I grew up with on Lee Avenue, and then I go to the Sotner Butcher Store on Rodney Street, or I go into Closenberg.
Which one? Oh, okay, the
Rodney
one.
The corner there, so they all know me. Many of the contemporaries of mine in Williamsburg and Borough Park today, my age, between 65 and 80, are children of Holocaust survivors. And most of these parents or grandparents didn't have a beard. Growing up in Williamsburg, in the shul that we davened in, the Tzelem shul, it was primarily Hungarian survivors that davened in that shul. I would say 10% of the people had beards.
Uh-huh.
So it was a different growing up in Williamsburg. It was
different. I see it also in the older generation. In general, I see in Williamsburg, the older generation is more comfortable with the plurality, and the younger generations in or out. And there's a tremendous dissonance for someone who isn't one or the other.
But now it's changing. Now it's going the other way. But my wife is from Brazil, and we love going to Williamsburg. My mother and father both survived Auschwitz and all the camps and all the Munkataba, slave labor. Okay. My mother was also Weiss, even though they come from the same town, they were not related. And in the Holocaust, 1942, in Hungary, every single town in Hungary had to contribute a certain amount of slave labor. In Hungary, in Hungarian, the word was munkataba. I'm sure your parents or grandparents.
I'm familiar with the word.
Okay. So my father was taken to munkataba. Now, my father's town was a smaller village, maybe 350, maybe 600 Jews. My father was taken, and another person was taken, Mr. Bennett Brown, who survived the Holocaust, and he had an apple farm in upstate New York. I forgot the city where it was. And my father couldn't understand why him and his best friend Bennett were told to volunteer for the Munkataba. Okay? Mm-hmm. I was taken to slave labor, and then he went to Ukraine, and then he saw the slaughter in Babi Yar and in Stanislav, how thousands upon thousands of Jews were being slaughtered. My father didn't believe this. And shuls were being burnt, and it was just unbelievable. So my father was able to get one Sefer Torah, and he sent it home with some people who were from Fayed Yarmut. My father comes home, and we don't know if my father was married or wasn't married. We think he was married. He never spoke about it. And this was 1943. end of 43. 2 years he was away. He comes home and he tells his father, Reb Chaim, that's who I'm named after, Tati, I saw how they're killing Jews. Because the Jews in Hungary didn't know what was going on in Poland, that the Nazis, it was like as if it was on internet. They didn't believe it. And especially the Jews in Hungary, many Jews were assimilated and they had the good life, so they didn't believe it. They said, they're only going to take the Jews, the poor religious with the burden past. Us high society Jews, they're not going to take us. So he told his father what he saw. And by that time, my grandfather was, Olav Sholem, was getting older, weaker, and he just didn't know what to do. Guess what? They go to the Rebbe again. And my father tells this particular Rebbe, and I'll tell you when I see in person who it was, again what he saw. Again started yelling at my father. You were a liar 12 years ago. You're a Zionist. You're scaring people. And
wow.
And then, of course, in April 1944, Achron Shel Pesach, which is the second day of Pesach, the Jews in Fairfield were taken by wagon and walking, I think 20 miles or 20 kilometers to Matasalka, which is a ghetto where all the Jews were from second day of Pesach till right after Shavuos. And then they were put on the wagons and they were taken to Auschwitz.
Wow.
So that kind of left an impression of my father, a bitterness to this particular Rebbe. But the point I'm trying to make to you is not because I'm trying to score points for my father. I'm sure there are thousands of other stories like mine. The fact that my father went through the war, first in the Munkataba, and then in Auschwitz, and my mother was in the quarry with the Schindler's List. We went there with two of my three brothers. We went to see that. The fact that he survived the war, okay? And right after the war, they went back to Hungary. He married my mom. After 6 months, they left. They went to Germany. There was not one day that my father, after the war, didn't keep Shabbos or kosher.
Mm-hmm. He was Orthodox from the beginning, but not a follower of a Rebbe. Exactly.
My father was clean. My grandfather had a beard, but my father was clean shaven. My mother covered the hair in the beginning, a sheitel, or at the beginning maybe with a hat. My father only grew a beard in the late 18s, early 90s, but he was a clean shaven man, never missed the minyan every morning, but he was a very tolerant, open-minded man. But he was a Zionist. He loved Israel. When soldiers were getting killed in 1956 and in 1967 and in Yom Kippur War, you couldn't talk to him because he was crying.
Mm-hmm.
Every Jew.
How come he came to America instead of Israel?
That's a fantastic question. He wanted to go to Israel, but my mother had an aunt that came out from Hungary in 1938. Her married name was Itzkowitz, a very famous family who lived on South 9th. It was my grandfather's from my mother's side, who happened to be also Weiss. And she signed papers for my mother and for my father and my older brother, Anchi, who was 75 years old today. And they sponsored my parents, and my parents came out in 1949. And this Mrs. Itzkowitz, Idaneni, that when at my bris, she was the Krater lady, she signed papers for all of her nephews and nieces that survived the war.
To sponsor them.
And because of this great Mrs. Itzkowitz, there are thousands of people like me walking around New York. I would say the majority are Shomer Shabbos, mostly like me, modern Orthodox or Young Israel or whatever you want to call it. I don't like labeling, because everybody says, "Die bist der größte Chassid," then we know that it's Chassid. You know what I'm saying? So a Chassid to me, if you have a good heart and you're out to help people and you do mitzvahs and you're kind to people, that's to me is a Chassid. Like I was in the hospital now for a major surgery that they corrected the surgery that I had 3 years ago. The Satmar Bika Cholim came every single day to my room because they heard I'm in the hospital to bring me food. Here are women, they can stay home, watch television, or, I know they don't, or go shopping. No, they go out of their way to go help Jews, regardless of their affiliation.
Yeah, Bika Cholim is, I think, one of the only instances where you see that communal spirit spread to the whole Jewish people.
They don't ask you if you wear sheitel. They don't ask you if your wife.
Yeah, of course not.
They come into your room. They have a list of Jews, and they go on to bring you food. But they heard from 2 years ago that I was in the hospital because I have a cousin, Itzkutz in Williamsburg, who sells, I'm going to publicize his business, Light and Sukkah. He heard I was there. He right away gave the word out. So I have a tremendous connection to the Hasidic family, to the community. I know the good things about them, their weaknesses, but I'm, like, let me go back to a story with my father, 1955. In 1956, there was the war in 1956. I remember as a little child, when Lee Avenue, I'm not going to ask you, Frieda, how old you are, but maybe your parents can remember when there was a trolley going on Lee Avenue. Do you remember that?
I don't remember, but my father grew up in Williamsburg. My father is younger than you, but he might. When did it stop? When did they tear out the trolley lines?
Something in the late, I would say around 1960s, something like that.
Oh.
It was a two-way street. Trolleys going back and forth. Anyway, there was an open car coming, and there's a Hasidic guy or two Hasidic guy on top of the truck. And he's, of course, now I don't know which Chassid he is. I'm not going to label if he's Satmar or he's this. I would imagine. And he was going, carrying Zionists. Don't support the Zionists. They're killers. And I don't know what happened. We were in the street, myself and my older brother, Anshi, my brother, Manny, who lives in London. My younger brother at that time wasn't born. He lives in Yerushalayim. And all I remember, my father's face turned red. And he was looking around what to do. And there on the street on Lee Avenue, where I grew up, 126 Lee Avenue, on top of the Meal Mart. I don't know if you know exactly where that is. There's a Meal Mart, a butcher store. I live in that apartment house on the second floor.
126 is, it's all the way almost at the new area.
It's between Hughes and Hooper.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, right opposite the Klosenberger Shul.
Okay, yeah.
Right opposite where you made that interview, the hardware store. You know, the Tip Top?
Of course. Yeah.
Who I grew up with. I happen to know him. Okay,
oh, really?
Nice. And I knew his father very well and his mom. I know that whole family. The nicest people.
The nicest people. The nicest people.
We used to sell products. We used to make from the furniture, Pesach stuff. And I used to have long hair, you know. My father wasn't very happy with the long hood, you know, with the little yarmulke. But when I would go in there, they were never criticized. They never said, this guy's with the long hood. They were never criticized. Why do you have long hair? It was like, maybe today it's different. Anyway, my father finds a metal bar, like a crawl bar but bigger, goes in front of the truck. Of course, the truck has to stop. My father climbs on top of the truck and smashes the window and smashes the microphone on top of the truck.
Wow. And
then he says in Yiddish, "Jetzt kannst du schon reden." Now you can speak. And the guy couldn't anymore communicate. That was my father.
It's very, wow. But this wasn't common of him. Was he often this confrontational?
He was confrontational when people, not physically, but he had close friends, for example. My father was a Cohen, so my wife said that he's a little bit a Cohen. And we were in the bungalow colony many years in Mountaindale. My uncle had a place, and all the families, all the survivors, like my parents and my uncles, extended family, and maybe 100 cousins. We were in one little bungalow colony in Mountaindale. It was really not fancy. It was a poor quality place, but we all went there for 10 years. We had a lot of fun. It was great. It was like an extended family. And you couldn't get into a conversation with my father if you were going to say anything bad about Israel.
I see.
There was one man there, Oliver Sholem. He was a really nice man. And he was always teasing my father about the Zionists, how bad they are. He was a Satmar Chassid. He was a very nice man. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to mention his name. Out of the ordinary, his granddaughter came to visit me in the hospital, and I didn't know who she was. When I asked her in Yiddish, thank you for coming. What's your name? So she tells me her married name. She asked, where do you live? I live in Staten Island. She said, Staten Island, really? I had an uncle who lived there. I said, who's your uncle? And she tells me the name. I said, what? That's your uncle? He was my close friend. We were together in Mountaindale in the bungalow colony, and then he disappeared, and then I didn't see him. Then he remarried. What happened? He, as they say in Yiddish, is zurückgegangen von der Weg. He totally became secular, and he was away from everything. I mean, I'm not going to elaborate what he was into, what he was not into. He went to California, and then he came back, and his father took him into the house. And he allowed him to do whatever you want to do. You want to smoke on Shabbos? You let them smoke on Shabbos. You want to watch television? You got them at television, but stay in my house. Anyway, this fellow passed away a few years ago from cancer. So when I told her that I was friendly with him, it was in shock. So anyway, this girl's grandfather and my father always went at each other because he was a Satmar Chassid and he was against Israel. So every time he knows how to push the button for my father, and my father would react to that. I remember as a little kid going with my brother Manny, Herr Schmendel, we used to call him, because we lived across the street, and we used to go play in the Gouda on Shabbos afternoon, on Taylor Street, and then on U Street, the park. I remember recollecting. Then we used to go down to Mincha, and I was playing there with my brother, younger. He was younger, 3 years younger, and some other boys playing ball in the shul, the Klosenberger shul. It used to be a movie theater, so a big place to play. And suddenly we see a handful of guys coming in. Now, I was 6 years old, maybe 7, a bunch of kids, Hasidic kids, coming in, turning over the table, turning over this forum on the floor and making a mess and running out. So that was my earliest recollection of Hasidim.
Oh, so they were protesting for something about the Klosenbergers.
Yeah. Why would you go into a shul?
Yeah, and to make a mess.
If somebody would do this today, they would be arrested. So I'm sure the Satmar Rebbe or the Sigeta Rebbe, because they came from the Sigeta Hasidim, said, go do this and this. They may have heard something from the Rebbe that gave him a license for them to do this. You can't teach kids like that anymore. It doesn't go, because today's kids are much smarter and more sophisticated than when I was growing up.
You think?
They tell me stories, some of this young generation that lives here in Staten Island, just got married 25, 30, 35 years, how they live, things they do, of the things they've done. I'm shocked. And I would say, what? Yeah, you're old fashioned. You know what I'm saying? By me, what did I do wrong that my father was angry? If my hair was too long, he didn't like that. That drove him crazy. Or Motzei Shabbos, myself and my younger brother Manny would come home late Saturday night. We went to a party. We went over here. You know, we were searching. But we knew.
Where did you go to yeshiva?
Well, the first yeshiva was Klosenberg, and then we moved to Borough Park, and I went to yeshiva. It was called Be'er Shmuel. The Rabbi Horowitz was the name, the Unsdorfer Ruf. He was a very special tzaddik from Germany. It wasn't the Hasidic shul, but it was like, the parents were like my parents, you know, Hungarian, Litvish, clean-shaven, some had beards. And later on, as kids got older, it became more Hasidic. That started to change, you know? Maybe if I would have stayed longer in yeshiva, I would have become Hasidic too, more Hasidic. I don't know. So
you were in Williamsburg from 1949 to 1960. In 1960, you moved to Borough Park?
Right, but my father had a factory on Marcy Avenue in Keap. I think there's a clothing store there now, or maybe they knocked it down and they built housing. And then in 1955 or so, my father bought with his partner a place on Flushing Avenue, and that's where he started making furniture. And then in 68, my father's partner left the business because business was bad. And my father couldn't drive and he had difficulties with his English. So I started working for my dad, for my father, Oliver Sholem, and I was going to college at Brooklyn College at night, 6 years going to college and helping my father in the business. And then in 74, I got married. And then that's the story. And I stayed in the business and I worked hard and to support a family. And my father moved to Israel in 1970.
Oh, your father moved to Israel? Stuff. In the end, he was in Israel.
Tough. He bought an apartment in 1971 in Bnei Barak. And I remember calling my father every single day from the little phone booth that we had in the factory. And mind you, those days, a phone call wasn't a cent. It was a lot of expense. And I would purposely tell my tati all the problems in the factory on purpose. And he would yell at me. The reason is I'm not there. You got to do this. You got to do it. I got him involved. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And then we would come home and he would see everything. I thought you had this problem. I thought you had this problem. I said, well, I listened to you. All the problems that you told me to do. I listened to you. Look at that. You know what I'm saying?
I see.
So my father lived his dream with my mother and lived in Bnei Barak from 1971, where they would spend 6 months a year in Israel, 6 months a year in New York. And of course, my father would come to work every day from Borough Park and help me in the factory. And of course, you know, do this, do that. But he had an aversion for buying new equipment. He was old fashioned. What do you need to spend money there? So slowly I would buy this machine and buy that machine. At the end, wow, look, this machine did in an hour, that would take me 3 days, you know, try to say.
Yeah.
So
So he lived his
lived
whole
in
life in
Vermont,
Israel.
and then he moved to my younger brother Moshe, who happens to be a Kalina Chassid. He's a Kalina Chassid, very gifted, very well respected. He runs now a internet company, software, for the smartphones, where like you were showing the other day, very successful company. But he wears a shleimal, but he's the coolest chassid you can imagine. He can tell you every single Billy Joel song, by the way, to this day.
I see. Billy Joel with a shleimal. Billy Joel songs with a
He's the
shleimal.
funniest guy out there, you know what I'm trying to say. So,
So you were going to say something about your father moved with your youngest brother?
My brother got married, he had a bunch of kids, and he moved to Yerushalayim in 1990, something like 1990, because, and he moved to Yerushalayim. So the last 8 years or so of my father's life, and then he grew a little beard, my father, but I had a picture of my father here somewhere. Anyway, for the last few years, he lived in Yerushalayim, my father, a block away from my brother. And then when my father got ill, he was taking care of my father and mom, and I would spend a month, 2 months every year going to Israel to help out my brother with my parents. And as they got older, it got more difficult, and then that's how it is. So I give all of our 4 brothers.
Oh, let's see. Thank you. Hi.
This is my wife, Betty Weiss.
Oh, lovely. Hi, Betty.
Maiden name Sonnenfeld.
Her maiden name's not also Weiss.
No, her maiden name is Sonnenfeld.
Gotcha.
Sonnenfeld was a great rabbi in Yerushalayim.
Yeah. Can I see again?
Yeah, sure. This is my father and mom. This picture was taken in 1997.
Oh, sweet. They look very yeshivish.
It's not yeshivish. My father, a little beard and a black hat, but he wore a shirt, with a tie, So when he came home from Israel, one of my brothers, I'm not going to mention, God bless him, he was upset at my father. Why did you grow a beard? Now you're growing a beard? He says, what's wrong? What's wrong? So my father turns to me, Chaim, because I was the most modern one, with the long hair, the little yarmulke. What do you say to me growing a beard? Like my father was afraid what I'm going to say, because he was always criticizing my long hair and coming home late at night. So I tell him in Yiddish, if this is what you want, Tati, and this what makes you happy, go for it, I told him. So he tells my oldest brother, you see, he's a smart one. You see, he's more accepting.
That's sweet. You never know how we think dynamics change.
But Frieda, this story that I'm telling you is the same story of thousands upon thousands of children of Holocaust survivors. You know what I'm saying? There's one thing that we did not want to do, myself and all my brothers, and for many others. The last thing we wanted to do was to hurt our parents who suffered so much in the Holocaust. So I think that kept us in line a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Today's kids today, they don't give a damn. If they want to do something, they don't care if a Rebbe or father or grandfather, you know what I'm saying?
It's different. The younger generation, being the post-Holocaust generation, had a completely, I am 3rd generation, and I can tell you our childhoods were so insulated from that.
Right.
We heard the stories, but we didn't have that visceral, immediate experience and of course, the generation now is very insulated from that trauma.
Right. So, for example, when we were growing up in Williamsburg, and of course, we grew up among Holocaust survivors, where all their faults that they had, all the sufferings that we had, you saw a Holocaust survivor sitting in shul and he was walking, you got out for that person to give him the chair. Or you went to the grocery store, Mr. Kresh, on Lee Avenue, which I'm sure your father knew. It was right next to the A&P on Hooper Street. You helped people with bags, or Shlomo Weiss Bakery across the street. You know what I'm saying? It was a different generation. There's something I wanted to tell you. I remember growing up in Williamsburg, on Hooper and Lee, there were 2 competing candy stores. It's not the candy stores that you were showing yesterday. When I talk about a candy store, you went into Joe's on one corner, Shapiro's on the other. Of course, they were open on Shabbos at that time. And you sat down at the counter and you had the little twirling chair. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
He said, hey, Weiss, what do you want? I'd like to have a cherry Coke. And he opened up the machine and he gave you a cherry Coke. What else would you like? I'd like to have a pack of baseball cards. And he would give you a baseball card. And you take out the card, open up the card, and chew the gum. What else would you like? Let's say an egg cream. What else? devil dogs, and we would be eating this openly in the street. But he was there to tell me it's not kosher. It's not kosher.
It wasn't kosher.
Who said it wasn't kosher?
I'm asking, was it?
I don't know. Nobody. My father didn't say it's not kosher. Don't eat it.
But I spoke to Nellie Groskat, who lived in Williamsburg for some years, and she had stories about the Hasidim going after the candy store.
Maybe later on, but probably later on after I moved to Borough Park. But while I was growing up till 1959, it was a different society. Maybe later on, with Shabbos and all that, it's a different story. You understand? But growing up as kids, we used to go to yeshiva with the devil dogs and cakes, and nobody said, and baseball cards and gums. The Rebbes didn't say anything to me. No, it was different.
What language did you all speak?
At home, we spoke only Yiddish. But
only Yiddish.
The Yiddish was my first language. My parents spoke to each other Hungarian. So I understand Hungarian.
You understand Hungarian?
Every single word.
Really?
Yeah, except when I listen to Hungarians by non-Jews, it's a very difficult Hungarian. It's more difficult to understand. When I listen to YouTubes on the news, I have a hard time understanding.
Yeah.
But I understand every single word. But my mother used to tell my father, my mother, "Rotot fiu," which means rotten kid. This kid is killing me. I learned all those words.
How do you say the best place? It's good to be outside, but the best place is at home.
A house, not in your house. It's very good to be in the house. I don't know.
No, there's an expression that.
I don't know. But my parents spoke to each other Hungarian. My mother, by the way, my father lost the entire family. There were 4 siblings. They all died. Uh-huh. My mom was 10 children. 7 survived.
Wow.
2 of them went to Israel. 1 went to Canada, and the rest was in Williamsburg. So my mother had sisters. She had brothers, and so there's one big extended family. And Shabbos, for example, we went to the Itzkowitzes, to the aunt, and to the cousins. Those were the people that my mother and father socialized in the 50s and then in the 60s. They didn't go to movies. They didn't go to the restaurant. Once in a while, my mother would go to the Yiddish theater with a neighbor of ours in Williamsburg, Mrs. Klein, who all over Shalom. But their whole society was her cousins, her aunts, her sisters, her grandchildren. My parents' social life was limited. They didn't want to make time for other people. They were busy raising their children the way they wanted, the right way, because they had lost a lot of time. My father got married again at a late age, in the early 30s, and that's what they wanted, is to give us a Yiddish education, okay, open-minded education. I don't remember my father ever saying bad things about non-religious people, ever. Or saying bad things about Hasidic people. My mother was a little bit different, but my father not, okay? My mother was a little bit more critical. She was more critical, my mother.
Of what?
Of people who are if somebody didn't cover their hair, or she was just more critical.
Okay, let's go back to memories. Let's talk about memories. I like old time memories. The candy stores.
Yeah.
What were the names again?
Joe and Shapiro.
Joe and Shapiro. Owned by Jews, do you know?
They were Jews, yeah, not religious. Where Joe was, there's now a liquor store, Donut. I don't know if you know that store.
Yeah. So it's on Lee Avenue, close to the Klosenberry Shul.
No, it's on corner Lee, corner Hooper.
Yeah.
If you want to interview a fantastic lady, go interview Mrs. Donut. She opened up that liquor store there in the early 1960s. She's part of the Herzog family. She must be 94, 95 years old. I was in the liquor store a few months ago. I spoke to her son. A phenomenal lady. She tells me to this day, the way Williamsburg turned out, she never expected Williamsburg would become the way it is right now. Because this was the old-time Austrian, Hungary, very, very religious, not Hasidic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this is another lady that you may want to go in and.
Yeah, I'm very.
I remember her, and I remember Shapiro. Shapiro closed down. I think there's an electronics store there right now. I remember Shlomo Weiss Bakery, and then I know Tip Top Hardware, that store. I remember Tauber Fish Store. I don't know if you know that store.
Yeah, Tauber Fish Store.
I remember Mr. Tauber, so I'll tell you a quick story. I was a little kid living in Williamsburg, so we went across the street to buy fish for Shabbos, right? Everybody, white fish and the filter fish. So at that time, as Mr. Tauber's parents were running the business, and he was still probably my age. My mother goes into the fish. At that time, they used to have the live fish in the tank. I don't know if you remember that.
No.
Not like today, you see the fish. Yeah. So my
Well,
mother,
when we were kids, they delivered it. They delivered the fish.
so maybe it's changed. So my mother would go to the fish store. This is on Lee Avenue between U Street and Penn, right off U Street. And my mother was telling Mrs. Tauber in Hungarian, I want the fish. She takes out the fish, and then she tells Mrs. Tauber, I don't want this. You know, what's wrong? It's fresh. I don't want this fish. I want that fish. So she puts it back and takes out the other fish. She looks at my mother very upset. My mother says to her, she asks my mother, what's the difference? Why did you make me put the fish back and take a fish that I bought the same fish? Because I don't trust anyone. I want to make sure this fresh. That was my mother. And they know this story till to this day. When I go inside, when they look at the fish, Mr. Weiss, we can't do what your mother did. It's all the same fish.
So, are you there?
So I remember buying fish over there. Then I remember across the street, then it's across the street from Tauber, there was Itzkut's Grocery. I don't know if you remember them. There was a relative of ours. And then I just have great memories. Going in the morning at 8 o'clock, the bus, we was right on the corner. And there was a great Hasidic that lived in Williamsburg many, many years. And I don't know if anyone else, if you know this man, he passed away many years ago. I don't know exactly when. His name was Chaim Gelb, G-E-L-B. He was a very famous man. He used to walk around 12 to 15 hours a day in the street, in the cold, in the summer, going to weddings, taking his yarmulke. He had a big black yarmulke, tzedukah, tzedukah, tzedukah. The man was poor, couldn't pay his bills, but he was collecting money for impoverished families where there's no parents, no children, tzedukah. And I remember every morning he would go inside, get a cup of coffee. At that time, there was a Weiss candy store on the corner. And he would make a bracha for us so we could say Umein, and then we went for the school. So these are fond memories that I have. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the
So you went to school by bus?
We went to school by bus, but coming home at night.
And it was only boys. It was a boys' school only. It wasn't together with girls in the building.
It was a hospital at that time. It was called Beth Moses.
Moses on Division Avenue.
No. It was a Hart and Skirmahorn. And that's privacy.
All the way over there, you were bused.
Yes, we bussed over there. It was near a high school, a Catholic high school, which was across the street. And I went back there with my wife a year ago. We drove by. It's not there anymore now. It's a housing project. And from there, we used to walk at night because there wasn't buses all the time for some reason, because we stayed late, because we had English, you know, up to the second grade, we learned English. We would walk from Hart and Skirmishorn 2 long blocks to the train on Broadway. I don't remember I think it was called Hart Street. There was on the Broadway line. We would take that train. Now what happened was you had to pay to get on the train. So the school you had a bus pass, not like today, but not everybody got a bus pass. So we'd let's say 4 guys get a bus pass. So one guy would go up the train, show it to the teller, go through, then we would throw down the bus pass down to the street, and the next guy would go up. So these 4 buses got like 20 kids till they caught on. So take the train. Mind you, we were 6, 7 years old in the dark. Like now, New York is dark at 5 o'clock. We would take the train to Myrtle Avenue. It's called the Myrtle Avenue shuttle or the L train. We would take the train from Myrtle Avenue and Broadway to Nostrand Avenue. Then we'd get off the train, go downstairs, and wait for the bus and to take us home. Can you imagine 1955, 1956, and 1957, 5, 6, and 7, and 8-year-old kids going on the subway all by ourselves?
Wow.
Now,
different world.
Did my parents worry about it? Probably. Could my father have done anything about it? No, because he was busy making a living in the factory. He didn't have time to, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. My mother, she was too busy preparing supper and doing the laundry and making sure that when we came home, when my father came home, the first thing my father did when he came home, 6 o'clock, gewaschen the hand, he washed his hands, right away, a bowl of hot soup. There was no such thing that my father would come home and he said, okay, I'll go watch television. I'll be back an hour when supper's ready. There was no such thing. The supper was ready. Not because my father demanded it. He didn't demand it.
Right.
My mother, Oliver Sholem, besides my wife now, is the most devoted woman in the life to her husband. No, I'm seriously not.
So you had a television in the home?
We didn't have it. We did not. We had a television later on, but that's another story. I remember my uncle.
Wait, how come your mother she never worked?
She did work when we moved to Borough Park because my father built furniture. They opened up a store in Borough Park making tables, mosaic tables. Betty, can I have that table, please? My mother was very talented and very smart. So she started making tables by hand. And they were selling them, besides, extra cash. And they sold quite a bit of tables. They paid rent. It was my father's, my mom, and my father's partner's wife, Mrs. Reichman. And they would make tables.
What kind of tables?
Look at this.
Wow. So it's tiled.
It's
beautiful.
Tiled,
is this handmade?
This is all handmade. The wood was made by my father, by a machine, wood legs. But this design was designed by my mom. The wood is probably some kind of not a very expensive. It's probably not an oak. It's probably a birch and then he stained it, my father. It was stained. This table must be from early 1960s, 60 years old.
Wow. How much would you pay for it now?
If I get another table like that, a few $1,000s. I'm sure in Williamsburg, these tables are running around.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's out of style and people might not. Yeah.
I'm sure there are tables because they sold hundreds of them. But then my mom and Mrs. Reichman at the same time in 1959, after being open for about a year, they both were expecting. So they were working as much as they can. And then when the babies were born, it was just impossible for them to continue. They tried, they got somebody else, just then the rent was raised. And that was the only time that my mother was working with my father.
So how many kids are you?
We are 4 brothers. It's my oldest brother.
No girls.
No girls. So can you imagine my mother raising 4 girls like the 4 boys? Like my oldest brother, Anchi, who's 75-year-old today.
He was born in Hungary?
He was born in Germany after the war. After the war.
In a DP?
In a DP camp in Bad Reichenau, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So then they came to America. I was born. And then I have a brother in London, Manny. He was born in 1952. He lives in
Which
London.
year did they come to America?
My parents, August of 1949. My mother was 8 months pregnant when I was
with
born.
You. Wow.
So maybe that's why, I'm what's the word, always on the go. Maybe I'm still going back.
You never know.
And then the youngest brother was born 1960. But there were no girls. There were 4 brothers,
And you all went to yeshiva?
We all went to yeshiva. We all went to.
Who was the stark? I get the sense that your father was very passionate about Israel. What about frumkeit? Who in the marriage was very, very strong on that?
You talking in my marriage?
No, in your parents' marriage. What I'm interested is this post-Holocaust experience.
I'm not the most eloquent person. I speak my mind. Many times it's done me right, but many times got me into trouble. I think my father, Oliver Sholem, was much more open-minded than my mother. Okay?
Right.
When I started putting on a Keap St, it's not because I was rebelling. I didn't want to wear black yarmulke. I wore a knitted yarmulke because I was connecting to the new movement in Israel after the 67 war, when everybody wore Keap St. Now, just because somebody wore Keap St didn't make him a shagitz, even though the Rabbunim said, oh, we got like a white yarmulke or a shagitz. That's how the fact that I like to wear long hair, that bothered my father. So I used to constantly argue with him over that. You know what I'm trying to say? Until one time, I had long hair, not like yours, but a little bit longer.
I get it.
I wanted to be cool, I wasn't looking for a Hasidic girl. I wanted a more modern girl. And I figured a more modern girl would probably want me more, because don't forget, this was the late 60s, early 70s, I didn't do anything bad. So my father said, you're going to take a haircut? I said, yeah, I'm going to take a haircut. Make sure when you come back, you take a normal haircut. Now, what's a normal haircut?
We know what's a normal haircut.
Shaved head is a normal haircut? I don't know. So what's a normal haircut? So I went to the barber. I remember on Lee Avenue was an Italian barber, and he used to cut the hair with a razor, okay? Not with him, Sheen. I said, do me a favor, Giuseppe, cut the hair a little bit so my father will notice I took a haircut. Okay, cut. I come to the factory, and my father was probably in a bad mood. And there he sees his son, who he specifically said, when you go get a haircut, make sure it's short. I took a chance, you push the button, how far? He was very upset. And I'm walking around the factory, and suddenly two of my father's Puerto Rican workers that he worked with him, who I loved very much, I was very closely, they grabbed my hand, they sat me down, they tied my hands behind the chair.
Wow.
And my father took one of these shears to cut formica, and he went to the hair, and he snipped my hair. Then he says to me in Yiddish, "Jetzt kannst du schon gehen mit der langen Haar." Now you can go with long hair.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I had to go back to the barber and trim it off. And that was the last time I had long hair. Here and there, it'd be a little bit longer, but that was it, So I realized if this made such a big deal for my father, you know what? It's not worth fighting over.
Yeah.
So, and that's it. I have two great kids. I have a daughter who's a head of a Jewish high school in Los Angeles, California. She's a principal with 5 children. She moved to California at age 42. She got twins. Age 40.
Wow.
And she lives in California. That we miss my grandchildren. And then I have a son with a little daughter living on the West Side, and he's a district attorney, bureau chief in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, really?
So we're fortunate, This is a story, but my story is like everybody else's story. Somebody's a doctor, somebody's a lawyer,
I want to go back to because I don't want to take too much more of your time, and I want to go back to talking about the oldies. What kind of children's game did you play?
The first thing you had to have in Williamsburg was a Spalding.
A Spalding.
Pinky. If you didn't have a pinky, you were lost. When I went to yeshiva, I had a pinky. I think it was 10 cents a quarter we used to buy it. When we lost it, it went down the sewer on the corners. We would get
a hanger,
a metal hanger, and put the hands into the dirty, disgusting sewer, and take it out, bring it upstairs to my mother, throw it in the bathtub, Clorox it, balls. Many times we wouldn't have what to do. We would go from sewer to sewer, and we'd come out with 10, 15 balls. So we had brand new balls,
Amazing. What did you play with the Spalding?
2 things. The easiest game we played was 3-box baseball. You know what that is?
No.
If you go on the sidewalk, you have a box.
Yeah.
You have 1 box, 2 box, and 3 box. So the person behind you, you hit the ball if you hit a single, and you have to hit the ball into the box before the person. If it bounced 1 time, there was a single, 2 times a double, 3 times a triple, it was 4 times a home run. So that's what we played nonstop. The problem with that game is the ball always ran into the street. Okay?
Of course.
The second thing we played out on Hooper Street, because Hooper Street between Lee and Bedford wasn't a really busy street in those days. It's not like today we have thousands of Hasidic buses, God bless them, parked over there. I remember Hooper Street, once in an hour, so we'd first go to Joe's candy store, have a Coke, cherry Coke, bubble gum, and go play stoop ball. We'd take the Spalding, and we would throw the ball on the tip of the stoop. Now you have to learn how to throw it on the tip. If you hit it the right way, the ball would fly over the people trying to catch it, and that was a home run. And then we'd run around. So we could play 2-3 hours of
run
baseball.
Around what?
We had bases. You would run around make-believe bases. And that was the baseball game, okay? And we were playing on Hooper Street 2 hours, 3 hours. My mother would never come out. She assumed that, that's what we played. Another game we used to play is that we would go to the Taylor Street Park. You know the Taylor Street Park? The schoolyard. And there was a wall over there.
PS16 over there?
In the public school, right? Taylor Street, right across the street from where Roebling meets Lee Avenue, with the beginning of Lee Avenue, where the Wiener Schule is.
You don't remember before the school was there?
I always remember a school over there.
Gotcha, okay.
I remember the school over there. Anyway, this goes 1958, right? So before we moved to Borough Park, we would go there with my oldest brother and the 2 cousins who were also Weiss, who lived on Division Avenue, my uncle's kids. And we would go to the public school, and on the wall, we'd take a chalk, make a big square. And that was the home plate. You know about baseball?
Yeah, a little.
And we would take a stick ball. We didn't have money to buy a stick ball, because those days it was $2 or $3. We would take my mother's stick. Mom, die darfst es nicht schubben? No, you can have it. We would take the stick.
What stick? What stick does she have?
A broomstick.
A broomstick. Okay.
So we would cut off the broom. We'd cut it off somehow. My father had a saw, and we put black tape around it, and that was the stick. And we would go later on. We became rich, and we could afford our own stick. So I think it was $1.50 the stick or something, or maybe we had already. And
where did you buy it? There was a toy store?
There was Joe's Candy Store. He sold everything over there.
So the candy store was the toy store?
That's toasty. He sold everything. Ice cream. We buy ice cream.
Baseball cards. So baseball cards were cards with bubble gum in it?
Yeah, the tops. Yeah. Ich habe mich gefragt, this is kosher or not, but we all ate it. Not only me. Everyone in Williamsburg that grew up with us. I'm sure the Satmar kids didn't eat it, or maybe they did. I don't know.
Were the Klosenberger kids keeping apart from the Satmar kids?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Well, Shabbos we davened in Salem Shul, so I don't know. All I know is that Satmar used to go daven later on. There was a friction there. I didn't get involved.
But were there kids in your neighborhood that you couldn't play with? They were too from?
No, I played ball. We played with a lot of Hasidic kids. I'll give you a story, and I'm not going to mention names. There was a Chinese laundry downstairs in my building, just to show you, because we didn't have a television. We used to go watch television on Motzei Shabbos to my aunt and uncle on Penn Street. We used to watch Art Linkletter, People Are Funny, Cowboys and Indians, good, decent shows. There was no sex, or there was no profanity, pornography. But Thursday night, there was a show called Zorro. Zorro was a Mexican guy protecting the poor people. Okay. Yeah. And there was a sergeant Garcia that used to take money from the poor people. And this guy Zorro was with a mask, and he would go and he would help the poor people. So this was a show that was very famous in 1957, 1956. Okay. And I teased one of the brothers because he happened to be here for Shabbos a couple of years ago. And we would go into the laundry downstairs, and we watched television in the Chinese laundry. Mr. Yu was right in front of my downstairs. It was the meal mart, the entrance to my house, and then the Chinese laundry. And we watched the show, right? And suddenly, a man, Hasidic man, he comes inside, and he sees me watching television. He knew who I was. He didn't say anything. And he went out. The next week, he comes back again. And I don't know what or where, but he comes behind the counter. And sure enough, he sees this kid sitting there. Kid at Langapayas.
You had Langapayas?
This kid. I'm not going to mention the name.
Oh, it wasn't you. It was a kid.
It wasn't me. It wasn't my brother. And maybe my brother Manny also. He recognized one of his sons was also in the Chinese laundry watching this show. Now, he was there the week before, but this man didn't notice his son. But for some reason, he came back the next week. Maybe, I don't know. He looked inside, and he went, as they said, Meshiga, my mother used to say. Started yelling, and next thing, the kid came to school. Believe it or not, one of his payas was cut off.
Oh, no.
He went and cut off the payas for one of his kids.
For the kid, because he was watching Zorro.
Because he was watching Zorro. Because the father punished him that if you're watching television, you don't deserve to wear payas.
Yeah. Was he like an Ungarish survivor?
They were survivor. He was a survivor. Very nice man.
Right. Wow.
There were 4 brothers, couple sisters. And I met these brothers over the years. And every time I see them, I relate this story to them to tell one of the brothers. One of the brothers lives in Williamsburg, very successful in real estate, and I need to look him up. He was my personal friend, and this is the kid that the father cut off the payas with.
Wow.
So I've passed messages. Do you remember when we used to watch television? So this is 1957, 1958.
Wow, that's a good story. Wow.
Now, what would happen today if a father catches his kid watching television?
This would not happen. I don't think this kind of...
Because the kid would laugh at the father.
I don't know. I think the younger generation is aware of what would happen if you grab a kid and you chop off a payas.
it's a different generation, you know what I'm trying. So these are stories growing up in Williamsburg. You know, it leaves a mark on me. And also,
yeah, I mean, what strikes me about the story also, it's interesting, is no one now would send their child to be, it would be embarrassing for the parent, you know?
Yeah.
The father is geschämt. He wasn't embarrassed that his child was walking around with one cut off pious.
And also one of the kids that used to come to watch the Zorro, he's today a great rabbi with thousands of Hasidim.
Wow.
I'm not going to mention which rabbi. So that's
yeah. Really?
Thousands of Hasidim. I'm not going to say.
And he watched Zorro.
So it's Zorro. It was a cowboy show. That was a show. So he got a Yetzer Hara to watch Zorro.
Wow.
So, you know, so here we are in 2021.
Was
65 years later, how we evolved. You know what I'm trying to say?
I want to ask you how your parents spoke about the Holocaust.
My parents spoke about the Holocaust. My mother spoke about how she was in the quarry, how she survived from one quarry to the other quarry, working in an airplane factory. Most of the years, they didn't speak about it. For some reason or other, Pesach on the Seder table, they spoke about the Holocaust. My father had a cousin who never got married. He was a bachelor, clean shaven. He came out from Hungary in 1956, good looking man. His name was Mr. Farkas. Was my father's first cousin. He was very well known in Williamsburg in the Wiener Schule. And as the neighborhood started to change, he never left Williamsburg. It was like you could always see him walking down. There was a time there were many Holocaust survivors who never got married after the war for whatever reason. Maybe they lost their wives, or they didn't want to get married, or whatever. There was a huge crowd of single men. And over the years, people passed away, and he stayed in Williamsburg. He died 11 years ago, and I spoke at his Levaya. And he was very well respected by the Hasidim. And they loved him because he was their connection to the Holocaust. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important. That's when my parents spoke on Friday, on the Untitled, we spoke about the Holocaust, how my father suffered and how my mother suffered. And that's the only time my father spoke. During the year, he didn't speak much about it, but on Yom Tov, he did.
And on Passover in particular.
Why? Because Achron Shel Pesach is when they took away the majority of the Hungarian and Romanian Jews. That's when they were taking it away. So it brings back memory on Pesach, you know?
Uh-huh.
We knew Pesach was going to be a difficult Yom Tov for us at the Seder, especially for my parents. But once we said our Goda, and he cried a little bit, my father, and we cried. And then afterwards, my mother brought out the food, and everything was great. You know what I'm trying to say?
Uh-huh. So it would be talking about like stories of people who got persecuted, like particular stories of things they saw.
There was one story that my father related, and it was even written up in a book about there was a young kid. And I heard it from my father, but I thought, Bubba Mai says, my father's making up stories. You're growing up as a kid, everybody's exaggerating. But then I heard it many years later from somebody else that there was a little kid. He was supposed to be bar mitzvah in the war, and he wanted very much his bar mitzvah, and he had to roll stones in the quarry. And if he couldn't do it, he was shot. And my father took a liking to this young boy. And I don't know exactly the particulars. My brother in London would know better. My father, after doing his quota, rolling stones or picking up stones in the quarry, went back up and did this for this little kid. So he did this. Yeah, and this is how this kid survived.
Oh, wow.
So this is stories I heard from my father, and I heard it from other people. And my father survived the Munkataba in Ukraine before 1942 because he was a gifted craftsman. He was a cabinet maker. He was very good with his hands with wood. And then in the Nazis, they needed something to keep their stuff. And then, does anybody know how to do this, and where they kept their boots or something? And my father volunteered, and he was building wood caskets or wood boxes for the Nazis. And that's what kept my father alive, with his hands. He was able to, work. So he did a lot of working like that, and he was just that's how he survived. And Auschwitz also, I don't know how he survived. I don't know. We don't know. This generation, your generation, try to think, God forbid if something would happen today, could we survive this? How did he survive? How did they survive? Perseverance.
I mean, many didn't. I mean, that's the
And
thing.
unfortunately, many didn't. That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
We're fortunate that our parents did survive.
Yeah. And we're here to look back at.
And that's it. You know, this is the story growing up in Williamsburg. And then after we moved to Borough Park, I still came back to Williamsburg every day. I built furniture, went to deliver with my long hair, my little yarmulke, until one day before Pesach, I go deliver furniture, you know, and I had long hair. I even don't remember where it was, one of the Bedford Gardens, one was schlepped up the furniture and I'm putting the stuff together. And this little, just a kid, a yingala with a langa pious, you know, and I had a little yarmulke, the long hair, you know, model, you know, dirty shirt and pants, tzitzis hanging out. And he tells me, and he turns to his father and he says in Yiddish, Tati kik, a goy mit tzitzis, a shegetz mit tzitzis. So I turn to the kid, I tell him in Yiddish, why am I shegetz? Why am I shegetz? He said, you have to come pious, bist a shegetz. So I turned to his father, his name was Friedman, I don't know any relation. I said, Mr. Friedman, has gehört with an Dienstag? Did you hear what your son just said? Well, what did your son say? Your son called me a shegetz. Yeah, he did? Why? Because I don't have a payas. He says, you know what? My son is right. Well, now, I wasn't going to say anything because I wanted to get paid. You know what I'm trying to say? But this was really a minority. You know what I'm trying to say? When I delivered furniture, people gave me respect. They offered me a cup of coffee, a piece of cake, a piece of this, a biscuit from the head. It was a warm, giving society. That's what I found. People my age, we were children of Holocaust survivors. I was, 25, 26 years old. And you know, whenever I walked into the homes, they were always warm to me and very nice to me, you know. Or when I walked into Gottlieb's, they know who I am. You know, it's a good feeling, you know.
Maybe I'll run into you at Gottlieb sometime.
I've been there for a while. I'm due to go now. Once my doctor gives me okay next week, I'll go out. Today was the first day I went out.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You seem like you're doing good.
Yeah, I had a couple of rough years, but you know what? I'm not complaining. You know why?
Why?
Because nobody wants to damn listen. That's why. But I remember Mr. Gottlieb's, the old man.
Mr. Gottlieb's father.
Well, not this one now, the young fellow, the grandfather.
Not the one who owns the store now, his father.
There's his father that's my age, around 70, but then there was his older one who passed away. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember him when he opened up, when he first opened up. So nothing has changed in the last 50 years, except the French fries. It's not as tasty as it used to be.
What? The French fries are good.
It's not the same. And there was a waiter there. I still think he works there. He's a tall, skinny kid with a clean shaven, glasses, tall guy. I was with him in Brooklyn College. I don't know if you know the same guy. If you know the same guy, he was hurt in a motorcycle accident. I don't know if he's still working there. He was a friend of mine. And what can I tell you?
I think I might know who you're talking about.
Yeah, very nice guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were together in Brooklyn College night school. We were in one of these classes together. So I became a furniture maker, and he became a waiter. So I remember that. And you know,
what was Mr. Gottlieb's, the original Mr. Gottlieb, like?
He didn't speak much. He was an El Chayid.
Yeah.
Always working, but he used to make the best pastrami. Not like the pastrami today. Come on. He used to take the pastrami and used to steam it. It's not like today. Every time I go there and I tell him that, it's a nish de zelbe, you know? It's not, you know? Maybe today, the only place that you can really get that kind of pastrami is probably in Katz Delicatessen, which is not kosher. You understand?
Yeah.
Or Shmulka Bernstein's. We used to go there a lot. Then used to get great pastrami. But those were the old days, you know?
Those are, yeah.
Remember Shmulka Bernstein's?
No. I don't know the whole culture of pastrami. I don't even understand.
There was a restaurant on the Lower East Side on Essex Street where on Saturday night, if you had a date with a girl, you had to go to Shmulka Bernstein. So you went to the movies with a girl, and then you went to Shmulka Bernstein at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you had to know that you may have to wait 45 minutes to an hour to get in. That's the truth. So finally at 2 o'clock, you were served Chinese food and this. And then I would, of course, come home and then get a lot of help from my father why I came home so late.
Of course. And the long hair.
Yeah.
It all turned out all right.
That turned out great, you know. But it's life experiences, and it's what you take from life. You know, a lot of guys my age went through the same the same, what's the word? Life like I did.
Procession, sort of.
Yeah, and totally went away from Yiddishkeit. Totally. I have a lot of friends who are, I haven't seen them in 30, 40 years who are now religious, who, intermarried, moved away, you know what I'm saying? Not a lot, but there were.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but also, yeah.
But one of the things that kept me in line is all the time when I was going to do something, I said, what would happen if my parents found out? Like, this would probably kill my father. He survived the Holocaust. Because one time, for example, I'll repeat it. Maybe my brothers won't like it when they hit his tape. I once came home very late at night. I didn't do anything bad. Didn't do drugs. Didn't run around with women. Went to a party on the west side, and we went here. And I came home late one day. Got stuck in traffic, and my father woke up. I woke him up, and he got very upset. And he said to me like this, in Yiddish. So I'm going to say it in English because I didn't survive the Keap St Avram Avinu. He used to do the idols in the how do you call the kalach oven in the oven. I didn't survive the kalach oven that you should come home early in the morning.
Uh-huh.
Now that was the most hurtful thing my father could have ever said to me. If he wouldn't taken my stickball bat and he would have hit me over the head with it,
it would have hurt less.
It wouldn't have hurt as much as that. And to this day, I remember when he said that, and I was furious when he said that. And after that, I realized it meant a lot to him. You know what I'm trying to say? But to compare two things like that, I don't think it was justified on my father's part to say it. But I respected him to say that. It was very hurtful to him. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I hear you. I understand where it's coming from.
Where it came from. And I think once I got married, my father was pretty lenient. For example, in 1969, I said, Tati, I'm going to Florida for a 2-week vacation. Go, enjoy yourself. He never asked me who I'm going with, where I'm going to sleep. They trusted me. My mother and father, they trusted me, except with short hair, not with long hair. And I would go for 2 weeks, and my father would cover me in the business, and I would call him up and stuff like that. And he was very happy for me, So in that way, my father was very, very lenient. My mother also was very lenient, in a lot of things.
But the pants and the covering the hair.
Yeah, but my mother wanted me, when I had bar mitzvah, of course, the first Friday you buy a black hat, you wear a black hat, right? So I wore a black hat. But in Williamsburg, which I wanted to mention you, I remember on Shabbos afternoon on Bedford Avenue, I wanted to mention, I remember in the afternoon, hundreds upon hundreds of boys and girls walking together on Bedford Avenue between Rodney Street and Taylor Street, up and down for 2 hours. Do you know that?
Why? It was sort of a opportunity to see each other.
To meet boys and girls.
Philip Fishman, who wrote a memoir of life in Williamsburg, wrote about that.
I remember. And then later on, when we moved to Borough Park, 13th Avenue Friday night was the rite of passage where boys I used to go. My parents let me go. They didn't say garnished. And I would walk up and down 13th Avenue, boys and girls. You didn't go with the girls because, girls were shy and still. But if you knew somebody, you would go, by the way, Chaim, this is this and this, and this is this and that. Now, I never lucked out because, I don't know, for some, I didn't hit it off very well. Then on 14th Avenue, you had that on Shabbos. You'd have hundreds of people. Everybody would go for Shabbos to Borough Park because 14th Avenue, you would have hundreds of people there, especially on Simchas Torah. People went there to meet.
Interesting.
Boys and girls from good families. You didn't want to go with a shidduch because you don't know, they were not shidduch material, So I remember that, in Borough Park.
That's interesting.
And then I would leave Shabbos afternoon to go to 14th Avenue, and my mother would say, "Why are you going without a hat? It's a pasnish. It doesn't look good, I said, "Ma, I don't want to wear a hat because I didn't want to meet a Hasidic girl or a more religious girl. I wanted to meet a more modern girl because if I'm wearing a black hat,
you'll attract.
What?
Yeah.
Puts me in a box. Like if I'm a chutzah today." And the girl tells her father, "I don't want a shtramel." Oh, God forbid, he's got to wear a shtramel, So my mother would say to me, "You got to put on a hat." I said, "Why do I have to put on a hat?" What will your Uncle Chaim say that if he sees you without a hat? Now, I found that statement not 100%. What she should have said to me, put on a hat on Shabbos. It looks good on you. You'll meet a nice girl with a hat. That would have been the right answer. You know what I'm saying? you know. So this is my mom, you know what I'm trying to say. But
Yeah.
I used to buy light colored suits, gray pants, gray suits, light colored blue pants. And I used to walk down 13th, 14th Avenue. I stood out. You know what I'm saying?
I
So a lot of the religious girls, look at who's that guy with the beautiful blue hat, light color. Oh, that's not for me. He's too modern for me. So here we are labeling people of what they wear.
Yeah. It's the oldest story in the book.
So this is growing up, Williamsburg and Borough Park. Like today, if a Hasidic girl tells her father, I don't want to wear shleimer, it's like the end of the world. You know, there's no such thing. You know, if you wear shleimer, it's the end of the world. So this is how things have evolved. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah, it's very eye-opening. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. There are so many things for me to sort of process and think about, and it helps fill in a lot of pieces.
But I've watched you. You know, I don't know how. You know, I saw your video and I heard your name. You know, going to Williamsburg. You know, once it starts getting warm, I'd like to join you on one of your tours. How's that?
Yeah, you'll give the tour.
I want to add just a quick story about Satmar, okay? Even though my father wasn't the chassid, I mean, he respected everyone, but every single year, there was a very handsome man who used to come to my father's factory. It's like as if it was yesterday. That's why I'm saying when you give a smile to a person, it makes so much of a difference than if you frown at somebody. Once you frown on a person, once you give negativity, you turn the person off. A man came to my factory around February or maybe January, with a black hat. He had a curled blonde pace, or maybe it was white, beautiful beard, a very handsome chassid. His name was Mr. Gross. I remember his name. And he was in charge of the Satmar Matzah Bakery on Broadway. Mm-hmm. And he would come to my father, Mr. Weiss, how are you? I want you to make for the Satmar Rebbe from wood, it's something to make with the matzahs. It's made out of wood, a mold, something. I don't know exactly what he did. And my father would make every year out of wood, pine, for the Satmar Rebbe. Mm-hmm. And so one year, he comes to my factory, it's ready. My father knows it'll be ready tomorrow. He said, well, I need it very badly. Do you mind dropping it off? I said, you know, can you bring it to the Rebbe's house? And at that time, the Rebbe lived on Morton Street, if I remember correctly, and Bedford. It's not there anymore. It's now his projects. And I remember going with my father. I was just out of work with my father, again with the long hair, the yarmulke, going to the house, dropping this off with my father, because my father didn't have a license to drive. And going into the Rebbe's house, and Mr. Gross was there, and Mr. Gross introduced my father to the great Satmar Rebbe. I mean, he was a tzaddik. Now, I'm not going to get involved here with the Rebbe's point of view of Satmar. Who am I to judge this great man? Or, you know, who am I? I mean, I'm a Zionist, but I'm not going to start saying bad things. What you know, right? He was a giant. I may disagree with Hasidim, how the way he behaved, but not with the Satmar Rebbe. He was a great man. And I remember the Rebbe going over to my father and thanking him and asking my father, how much do I have to pay? My father said, no, I don't want any money. He said, no. How much do I owe you? And of course, my father, you know, $10. The Rebbe opened up his pocketbook. You could see his white stockings, and he would give my father that $10 because he knew this was work, took work. Yeah. That shows, to me, that shows greatness of the Rebbe.
Interesting.
One more story. 1969, I remember it was like yesterday, this time of the year. We went down to Florida. A friend of mine, Keap St, and we were staying in this hotel in Florida, near Miami Beach on 30th Street. And it was Rosh Chodesh. And, you know, at night, you know, we got up in the morning. I wasn't a big shul goer because I'm on vacation, you know. Hey, guys, you want to go to see the Satmar Rebbe? You know? So I said, yeah, we'll go to Satmar Rebbe. So we went to somebody's house. His name was Rabbi Moskowitz, Facial Moskowitz from Brazil, who was very close to my father, Oliver Shalom, Rabbi Moskowitz. He lived in Miami Beach. We went to daven there. And that was the minyan, you know, a colored shirt, you know, maybe the yarmulke, you know. We weren't Hasidic. And Shimmy Silver, who passed away, he had very long hair. And he really looked like a real hippie. He happened to be a very religious guy. But he really looked, with the beard, scruffy beard. And we davened with the Rebbe. And afterwards, we went over to davening to give Shalom Aleichem to the Rebbe. I was so scared that the Rebbe would start yelling at us. Well, the Shagers, where's your payers? He came over to every single guy that was from Borough Park, from New York, modern-looking guys, and gave everybody a Shalom Aleichem. But not a plain Shalom Aleichem, a warm Shalom Aleichem. And I still remember that.
Interesting.
So, well, the point I'm saying is that you get a lot more by being warm and welcoming to kids today's society than to denigrate and to say he's a shagets, you're not this, you're not that. And I think that's the way we got to go. We got to be more tolerant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You get no argument from me.
Except when it comes to long hair.
Except when it comes to long hair. We're against long hair.
Frieda, thank you very much, Frieda.
Thank you so much, Harry. It was such a pleasure. I really appreciate your time. And also regards to Betty.